The supreme leader of Iran was taken out. 8 days later, his son Mashaba was handed the throne. And in the middle of all that, we have Russia, China, and Turkey aligning in a way that looks like it was pulled straight out of Ezekiel 38. Let's talk about Gog and Magog. In chapter 38, Ezekiel names a coalition lined up against Israel: Persia, Meshech, Tubal, and Magog. Put them on a modern map and it looks exactly like our newsfeed. But the villain in this prophecy isn't a nation. It's not a single leader. It's not even human. To see what Ezekiel actually wrote, we have to start with names. Not modern names, but ancient ones. Ezekiel 38, verses 2 through 6. The coalition: Gog from the land of Magog, Meshech, Tubal, Gomer, Beth-togarmah, Persia, Cush, and Put. These aren't code, they're coordinates. Real places, and we can pinpoint every single one of them. Let's start with Meshech and Tubal. On a modern map, that's Turkey. Gomer, the Sumerians, today that's the region north of Turkey and the Black Sea. Beth-togarmah, eastern Turkey, Armenia, and the Caucasus. Now Magog, 1st century Jewish historian Josephus aligned them with the Scythians. They were nomads, warriors from the Eurasian steppes. It's Russia's backyard. Verse 5, Persia. That one needs no translation. Iran. So let's lay it out on the board. Meshech, Tubal, Gomer, Beth-togarmah, Turkey. Magog, Russia. Persia, Iran. And on February 28, the United States and Israel hammered Iran in Operation Epic Fury. The leadership's gone, but before the dust even settled, Ezekiel's list of nations started making their moves. First, Russia condemned the strikes. Then, they quietly shipped Tehran fighter jets. China demanded a ceasefire, but they also used Iran as a proxy lab to test American weapons. And Turkey locked the United States out of its airspace and suddenly started acting like Israel's new threat. Turn on the news and you're going to hear that this is a geopolitical chess match. That's just puppets. Today, we're going to look at the strings. The biblical authors didn't look at the world and see geopolitics. They saw spiritual warfare. The conflict playing out right now is just the surface. Underneath it, we find territorial spirits pulling the lever of human empires. This isn't a story about the world spinning out of control, but it's part of an ongoing redemptive story. God isn't just reacting to the Middle East, but I believe he's setting a massive trap, and folks are being led straight into it. Ezekiel 38:15, God tells the enemy, "You will come from your place out of the uttermost parts of the north." The Hebrew phrase there, Yarkate Zaphon. Our English Bibles translate it the far north. And that's accurate, but it also misses the point, because Zaphon isn't just a direction on a compass, it's a name. Mount Zaphon, modern Jebel el-Akra. It sits between Syria and Turkey, and in the ancient world, that mountain was the most spiritually loaded piece of geography on earth. To the Canaanites, Mount Zaphon was Baal's throne, the storm god, the final boss of the ancient pantheon. He held court there, he issued decrees there, and when Ezekiel says that God comes from Yarkate Zaphon, he's not just giving us a map coordinate, he is telling us exactly where the army's authority originates. Gog is marching from the mountain of the rebel gods. That's Genesis 11, Babel. The nations rebel and God scatters them. But look at Deuteronomy 32:8. And look, we have to use the Dead Sea Scrolls here. It's the oldest text that we have, and it says something that a lot of our modern Bibles put in a footnote. When the Most High gave the nations their inheritance, he fixed their borders according to the number of the sons of God. Not sons of Israel, but sons of God. The later Hebrew manuscripts changed it, but the Dead Sea Scrolls kept the receipts. At Babel, God didn't just scatter the nations. He placed them under the authority of lesser heavenly beings, members of his heavenly council. He kept one nation for himself, Israel, and he appointed the Archangel Michael as its guardian. But when we read Daniel 10, it tells us exactly who was running Persia. It wasn't a human king, it was a territorial spirit called the Prince of Persia. Look back at Ezekiel's coalition. Persia, Meshech, Tubal, Magog. These nations are still under the governance of these rebel heavenly beings. When Gog's human army marches, these principalities are marching right with them. The visible war is just a surface. Underneath it is a war that started at Babel. In Psalm 82 is a courtroom scene. God stands in the assembly of these heavenly beings and he indicts them. How long will you judge unjustly? See, they were supposed to govern the nations with justice, but they didn't, and God sentences them. You will die like men. The battle of Ezekiel 38 is that sentence being carried out. On the mountains of Israel, in fire, earthquake, and hailstone, God's taken back what the rebel gods corrupted. And here's the detail that should make our jaw drop. Let's read Psalm 48. It describes Mount Zion, God's mountain, using the exact same Hebrew phrase. Yokarte Zaphon, Mount Zion in the far north, the city of the great king. Same words, different mountain. God has displaced Baal, and Zion has become the real Zaphon, the true throne, the actual seat of authority. Ezekiel 38 is a supernatural version of King of the Hill. The rebel gods operating through Gog's coalition make one last run at God's mountain, and they lose. I need to pause right here because this is when interpreting ancient prophecy can go off the rails. Look at Ezekiel chapter 38, verse 11. Gog is going to attack a people that are living in unwalled villages, at peace, off guard. For decades, people read that and said, well, that can't be Israel. Israel has the Iron Dome, the Iron Beam, David's slain. They are the most fortified, hyper-militarized nation on earth. I get it. But we have to think like an ancient. In the ancient world, you built a wall when you expected an attack. An unwalled village wasn't defenseless. It was unsuspecting. The people there had stopped watching the horizon. October 7, 2023. Thousands of Israelis are at a music festival 3 miles from the Gaza border. Families asleep in their beds. The most advanced surveillance system on earth is monitoring the border, and it's breached by men on paragliders because the walls made them stop watching. The Iron Dome doesn't contradict unwalled villages. It might be what created the condition. Now hear me clearly. I'm not telling you that this is the final fulfillment of Ezekiel 38. I believe there's pieces of this timeline that haven't played out. The full coalition hasn't assembled, the invasion on the mountains, the 7 months of burial, the 7 years of burning weapons. We're not there. But I'm telling you, something has shifted. The Russia-China-Turkey alignment, the coalition forming on live television. We're not looking at shadows anymore. We may be closer to this thing than we realize. And the shape is unmistakable. So why does God do this? Why stage the battle? Why draw the enemy out into a trap on purpose? He tells us, if you read the book of Ezekiel, there's a fingerprint. A phrase that repeats 70 times. It's the theological spine of the entire book. Yada, Ani, Yahweh. Then they will know that I am the Lord. Ezekiel 38:23. I will show my greatness and my holiness and make myself known in the eyes of many nations. Then they will know that I am the Lord. Listen, this battle is not just about saving Israel. It's about reclaiming the nations. Remember the courtroom scene in Psalm 82? God stands in the divine council, and after sentencing, after the verdict is handed down to the rebel gods, there's one line left hanging. Arise, O God, judge the earth, for you shall inherit the nations. The Gog War is that line being answered. On the mountains of Israel, God takes back what was forfeited at Babel. From our angle, it's Operation Epic Fury. 1,700 targets. The supreme leader taking out the first wave. But from the other side of the veil, the headline's simpler. The Prince of Persia lost his sword arm. And for a moment, that territory really did look open. Iran's own constitution says a transition council takes over. A body of 88 clerics meet, and they weigh in who the next leader's going to be. But that's not what happened. Under missile fire and late night phone calls from the IRGC, they bypassed that law. They rushed through the Ayatollah's son in exactly 8 days. Think about the irony here. In 1979, revolution swore it would never be a monarchy. And they just created the Khomeini dynasty. And the main qualification they bragged about on state television? That he was hated by the enemy. That even the great Satan in Washington called him unacceptable. That was his resume. But Jabba Hamidi didn't win an election. Something more sinister changed skin to keep the territory. But I need to say this because this is where the real danger starts. Jesus tells a story in Matthew 12. A spirit leaves a man, wanders around, and he comes back. Finds the house empty, and it brings 7 more with him. The last state is worse than the first. That pattern runs through history. Caligula was bad. Nero was worse. Saddam Hussein was removed. ISIS moved in. Lenin dies. Stalin steps up. Every time a dictator falls and the house is left empty, something fills it. And it almost never comes back with less. Either the gospel fills the house or something worse moves in. And right now, the house just got refurnished. Don't watch the news and think the job's done. The breakthrough happened, but now the real fight starts. Keep the territory, fill the house. Don't leave it empty. The war started in a garden. It ends on a mountain. The pattern's running, and the story's not finished. I've put the rest of this Ezekiel 38 prophecy, the Revelation 20 connection, the burning weapons into a free research brief linked below. Because we can't understand the Prince of Persia or what happened in Iran until we understand the courtroom where this war actually started. The rebel gods didn't just rebel, they were indicted. They were sentenced. I break down that exact trial and the verdict that changes everything right here. So click and I'll see you in the courtroom. God bless you.